Um, this is gonna be from the one some of NIWA, the negative influence of on well-being by Jen Johnson and Ollie Risberg. I think I read through the paper. I had some questions and I wrote it down. Made sure to use a research question because research questions are more into it. It goes more into the substance of what the paper might have been talking about, and then general just question you ask GPT four or any of those ones. I think it's a good learning tool, uh, especially the research questions. And yeah, so I have some questions for it. This microphone is really bad. Then I don't even know if it sounds well. I didn't check. I'll check. Oh my god, it is so quiet. It is very quiet. Okay, I can deal with that. Jen Johnson, and Ollie Risberg, a simple analysis of harm, the negative influence on well-being, is echoing. Negative influence on harm defends what they call the negative influence on well-being account (NIWA) of harm. NIWA captures the intuitive first thought that harming someone means adversely affecting their well-being. In other words, an event harms an individual only if it has a negative adverse effect on that individual's well being. This simple account takes seriously the idea that harm is fundamentally about making someone worse off in terms of their own good or welfare. Unlike more complex theories, NIWA wholeheartedly embraces the connection between harm and well being and claims that an event negatively affecting someone's level of well being is both necessary and sufficient for it to count as harm. Johnson and Risberg. I know I'm pronouncing that right because it sounds like I'm saying Riz. Thus proposes NIWA as a straightforward analysis of the concept of harm, avoiding convoluted conditions or counterfactual comparisons. If something lowers or impairs your well being, then it harms you. Conversely, if it does not affect your well being at all, it does not harm you on this view. Notably, NIWA meant to be a conceptual account of harm, not merely a linguistic or contextual definition. It identifies harm with a kind of negative impact on prudential value. I asked it when I was asking the prompts. I made sure to ask what prudential value is. I read a paper specifically on prudential and parentalistic connections, but it didn't talk about it talked about what prudential meant somewhat, but went more into what parentalistic, and the author said that they didn't agree with parenting another person. I think goes back to that simple thought experiment that if you have a friend who is always late, and maybe they have a date, you set up a date for them, and you know they're gonna come late. Should you like tell them a lie that the party is gonna start or the date's gonna start at 8 o'clock when it really starts at 10 o'clock to make sure they come early? um, would you do that? The author says you shouldn't do that because you're treating the person as an object to be molded. I don't know. I kind of agree with what he's saying, but he didn't talk about prudential value too much or prudential reasoning. So prudential value they're describing right here is going to be prudent on personal welfare. But again, they have to define welfare because that seems a bit confusing. I've met a lot of people when I bring up this argument. I'm trying to just get as much objections to this argument so I can then look more into how to counter those objections. But the objections I've been getting are a uh, bit, ridiculous. I've heard people say that rocks have well-being, that plants have well-being. I mean, well-being in regards to the ecosystem is plausible, but I wouldn't say well-being in that sort links back to any intrinsic moral status or harm to that thing. Because I get well, you could say the environment has moral value. I wouldn't say the ecosystem has. I don't know. I have to look into it, but ecosystem most certainly has moral value of some sort. Okay. The authors also endorse the parallel account of benefit, the positive influence on well-being account (PIWA), which defines benefiting as positively affecting well-being. This symmetry underscores the harm and benefiting are two sides of the same coin. Both are understood in terms of influence on individuals' well-being. By surrounding harm in well-being, NIWA aligns with our normative sense that harm matters because they make someone's life go worse. Indeed, Johnson and Risberg note that it is prudentially and morally significant whether an action affects someone's well-being. Thus, NIWA also neatly explains why harming someone is pro tanto wrong, because it by definition reduces their well-being, and similarly, we have prudential reason to avoid being harmed and moral reason not to harm others. On pro tanto wrong, I thought the paper was talking about overall harm. Pro tanto wrong can, of course, that can be justified because pro tanto just mean proportional to whatever you're dealing with. Overall harm is, I thought, the main reasoning for the paper. But of course, pro tanto wrong. I mean, if you're in a single scenario where, sure, it's not going to be overly harmful, but let's say you could work overtime for your job and gain $6, or you could just not do overtime and you'll still get $6. There's no change. There's no merit to your actions. It would be go against prudential reasoning to say that you'd work overtime. Imagine that overtime isn't going to add to something later in the future. It's just for the sake of doing overtime. It won't help you in the morning. I think that would be going against, especially if that overtime causes exhaustion by overworking or losing out time on a lot of other things that you could benefit from. Um, well-being, prudential value. So wait. So they said benefit and harm are like the same coin, same coin of blah blah blah, because either one of them affects your one of them, both of them. Oh my god, both of them affects your well-being. So I guess that's understandable. Well, um, well-being, prudential value, neutrality, and temporal versus lifetime well-being. I mean, the reason I asked for what neutral well-being was because it sounded a bit vague. I understand a slight bit, maybe the capacity for well-being. So zero, on a well-being scale is zero, but I've heard criticisms by one of the YouTubers I like that said he doesn't like to put value numbers like on well-being. I get what he means because he then brought up the point of what if we put 90 trillion well-being points in positive? What would that mean or signify? Uh, he's right, I guess, but I think it's just a way to appeal to our intuitions. I mean, if someone says um, every time they eat an apple, they get 50 or 1,000 more well-being positive, that just means they're significantly more happy eating this apple than the average person. This mic is terrible, but it's fine. Well-being in this context refers to what is good or bad for an individual, sometimes called what is good or bad for an individual. This is prudential reasoning. Someone asked me once to define what prudential reasoning is. I basically gave this definition. Then they said I didn't give a definition. And then they asked me, what makes harm? Why shouldn't we harm ourselves? I then said prudential reasons. And then they said, oh, you didn't give me any definition. I'm like, I did. Anyways, just random points. Sometimes called prudential value or welfare, it is essentially the quality of a life from the perspective of the one who lives it. Jonathan and Risberg use the notion of well-being in a standard philosophical sense, compatible with major theories like hedonism, well-being as pleasure minus pain, desire satisfactionism, or objective list account. I almost had a revelation revelation is a bit too much, but I almost had one when I just I came to really understand what this means. The authors are not given a definition of well-being. I mean, they're just using some of the major theories, like pain, pleasure, desire, like it's already listed, desire, satisfaction, objective list account, all that stuff. But within all these major theories of what well-being is, it all requires some sort of mental factors in order to necessitate, there you go, some sort of well-being. So it's not necessarily saying that well-being is going to specifically be pleasure or pain, or is it going to be desire or interest, or is it going to be some sort of objective list. um, it just means, in some sense, that the the fetus is not on any well-being level at all. And these are just theories that account for well-being, and the fetus wouldn't be accounted at all. Just like a Dell laptop wouldn't be accounted on a well-being scale. And the problem is that if a rock had well-being, from what I've been hearing, some people say rocks have well-being as a counter to what I'm saying. I think it's such a terrible terrible way to try to rebuttal what I'm saying. I already stipulated within the definition of well-being that there's going to be some mental factors or some sort of hedonism, desire, satisfaction, or objective list theories being involved. If I'm already stipulating what my definition of well-being is going to be, at least gonna what some criteria for well-being is gonna look like. I don't know why you're giving me your definition of well-being. That's obviously gonna be wrong. I mean, how are you gonna defend the position that the rocks it, it's just a kind of bad faith. I mean, it's a poor way to try to deduct to you my point. Some I think this girl once said on podiums like that what's it called, the fetus has dispositional traits towards some sort of well-being or something like that. I guess I can agree. I guess, but the point is in well-being theory that it doesn't have well-being. It's not on it, on the scale at all. I mean, an abortion stops it from ever having a temporal well-being level. So I don't get the point being. And she was pro-choice. No, she either was pro-life, larping as pro-choice really badly, because she then was trying to use rational essence as a pro-choice argument. Then she tried to use hylomorphism as a pro-choice argument, and I think Cheeseball came in and had to correct her because she didn't listen to what I was saying. I was saying that you can't really use rational essence for pro-choice because essence means like something foundational to that thing or substance. Uh, the, I've heard I've heard other arguments that say something like from Nathan Nobis that in his paper his counter to Frederick Beck with rational substance, he pointed out or even made a slight joke in his paper that uh, the body is made up of accidental properties, and the mind is going to be the essential property or whatever it is. So he suggested the idea that the mind is going to be essential, whilst the body's properties are going to be accidental. I mean, so if a being has a mind, then it's to be accounted for. But this doesn't. He doesn't say it needs to be a rational mind. He just says the mind is essential. Um, so even under what I can think of, what she might be alluding to, I don't think it makes much sense. And I think basic. I think another paper by I can't. It's by Morris. James Morris or just Morris the, in his paper against what is it called, substance ontology. He said that I'm trying to remember the specific page. Oh, the page was page 18, I think, or page 4. Page 4. Uh, page 4 of 28. He said that biochemicals, biomechanisms, and etc. already can account for the development of the fetus, and that the fetus is just like any other organism that follows the laws of physics. So the explanatory power of uh, the fetus is need not be done through Aristotle. I swear I have a like bad. This is why I don't voice chat. The it need not be explained through Aristotelian teleology. Thank God. This is why I don't VC. Uh, I um I think it's not to say Aristotelian what you say teleology is gonna be false or true. It's just undermined by biochemicals and biomechanisms. Because biochemicals and biomechanisms already have a greater explanatory power than artist oh my god, than teleology. Okay, and I've heard people debate that. Oh, it's the biochemicals and the biomechanisms. There's some sort of inbuilt teleology from from Aristotle or something like that that drives them towards being this or that. That sounds so. It sounds like Hassan's Hassan's. There's another guy from another paper called Hassan. Um, the paper is called, from what I can recall, "A Defense for Factory Farming." Or yeah, and he said basically this counter in a way he created his own argument, but his own argument seems to just be a sub branch or just a branch of a rational soul stuff and all that. And he basically said there we have a root capacity towards um, rationality, and then within the paper he says when he was deaf and he was getting beat up. The whole Phil paper community, dude, I saw 50 like there people created counters. I think the whole vegan community came, all the vegan philosophers you could think of came together to shit on this one guy. And so in this one paper is basically the ultimate counter to why Hassan's defense of factory farming is bad, and in the paper, it just stomps him out. Because the guy, even at the end of the paper, I think the last two papers for the end of it, uh, Hassan, the guy who first initially defended factory farming with his root capacity idea, he said even if root capacity isn't true, so he even like by even adding the thought that it's not true because he was getting stomped on because you had actual biologists going against everything he's saying, and he said even if it's not true, this or that is real. Um, wait, wait, even if it's not true, what did he say? I'm trying to remember those exact lines. Even if it's not true, it is still the case. Hmm. I can't remember what he gave as an alternative. It wasn't. He didn't support his root capacities argument, at least to the end. I went way off board. Psychological positive. Yeah. So this guy. So well-being level. Newspaper. Okay. Hassan. Okay. Paper show that he can't do this. In the Morris paper. Morris gives a great defense for why biochemicals and all that stuff. Mm, yeah, you can defend it. But I've also heard people say like um against biochemicals and all that stuff that there's some sort of reason. I wish I'd recorded the debate. It sounded like the guy was a bit knowledgeable when he's talking about. He, he said something. The way to defend this view is not through any empirical evidence or anything like that. He said through. He kept on asking me if I'm an empiricist or whatever it is, because he said his view can be defended through Agorian reasoning. I have yet to even look what that is. I don't even know. I like. I've been either he's spamming jargon, but I doubt I can recall what he said exactly enough to find what type of reasoning. Because maybe there is some sort of reasoning called Agarian reasoning, something maybe agario.com. I don't know. I just don't understand where to find this stuff. That's why I like to record stuff. So, because I can't, sometimes it's hard to recall what some other person said. Maybe I can ask GPT later. But I want to go through this. But this is going to be an easy paper to go through. I think I only, I can read through most books with ease. Uh, if it's not jargon spamming. But that goes for anyone. Uh, as long as the book is not just spamming words you don't know, and it just seems pretty easy to read through most of it. Anyways, okay. Well-being, prudential value, neutrality, and temporal versus lifetime well-being. I feel like I didn't answer the question on neutrality though. Um, Well-being in this context refers to what is good or bad for an individual, sometimes called prudential value or welfare. It is essentially. Wait, have I been doing this wrong? I said prudential. I've heard the papers. The paper said prudential reasoning, but this GPT sum up is saying prudential value or prudential welfare. I want to look at what prudential value or prudential welfare is. Prudential value. This is an AI sum up. I wish there was a Stanford paper. I like the Stanford philosophy paper. Oh, there's knowing what is good for you, a theory of prudential value. I want to read. I don't want to. I need to stick. I need. Anytime I try to read something, I get too interested in other things, and then I read that. Prudential value or well-being. What is this? When was this paper written? Sometimes I look when the paper is written because I genuinely don't like reading papers from 100 years ago. It's just a pet peeve of mine. It's a bit immature, but I just don't like anything from 100 years ago. I really don't want to read. Is it? Yeah. It's not gonna be good for me, but I really don't want to read that. All of these citations are from a long time ago. Um, this paper is about 20 years old. I'll read the abstract, I guess. Language of well-being came in high school. High school concern number. Should I become a doctor? Sure. The axiological nature of potential value. Conceptual potential is neither moral or aesthetic nor perfectionist. It is arguably a kind of value irreducible to any other kind, which may nonetheless stand in various substantive relations to them. Hence, for example, if we admit that pleasure has potential value, the alleged truth of a claim evil pleasures are not good for us cannot be conceptual, must be argued substantially. As shall see in section 2.1, however, this claim that well-being is not reducible to any other values has been the object of substantial criticisms. The normativity of well-being. There is a widespread agreement that the effect of well-being is both a descriptive and non-normative concept, as Tiberius and Placia claim that the term well-being aims to pick out an empirical phenomena that can be measured, compared, one hopes, relies in people's lives to achieve well-being, to enjoy a certain kind of life or a set of experiences that we can investigate and influence. Yet well-being also has normative significance. Example, it involves reasons. If A is better for you than B, certis paribus. I know what this means, but I can't remember this Latin word. All things. My God, bro. This is one of the first Latin words. But I can't pronounce it though. Uh,
What does ceteris paribus mean?
Cateris paribus.
Well, it's Latin for other things being equal.
Cateris paribus.
Economics. Well, ceteris
I don't want to learn about economics. Cateris paribus. You have more reason to do A. While very few disagree with this claim, growing disagreement is to be encountered with respect to the kind of normativity well-being is taken to involve. The standard view is that well-being is an agent relative value, i.e., it gives reason to the agent whose well-being it is. Hence, if something increases my well-being, then I have reason to desire it and pursue it. And similarly for you and your well-being, him and his well-being, etc. In each case, the reason given fact for the agent is his or all good will be contributed to or not diminished. It is less clear. However, what the standard view holds with regards to agent neutrality of well-being. Agent neutrality here means that everyone has a reason to promote everyone's well-being, including his or her own. For every agent, the reason given fact is that someone else's good would be promoted or not diminished. The limit of the concept well-being. The question can be understood as at the level of the subject of well-being. What kind of entities can have well-being beside human beings? Non-human animals, plants, trees, microbes, or can it be understood at the level of the kind of state activities or choices that can be counted as enhancing someone's well-being? One important discussion here is the interplay between well-being and self-sacrifice. One of the central features of the idea of well-being is that an individual's well-being or self-interest may well compete or come into conflict with other demands placed on the individual. Perhaps the most common conflict of this kind is the one between one's well-being or self-interest. Yeah, this is what they were talking about per tanto harm, per tanto well-being or something like that, whereby you have to take in consideration the proportion, what's at stake in the moment. Sometimes per tanto harm, it is harmful, but it's not overall harmful for your well-being, because I can imagine that maybe skipping your job that one day when you're like, we can imagine that there was a meeting that day and you should have come. If you come to the meeting, you're gonna get a promotion that's gonna give you a lot of money, that's gonna give you a lot of time by yourself, etc., etc. That's gonna promote your overall well-being later in life. But maybe you want to sleep in because you're extremely tired that day. But if you miss this meeting, it's gonna be worse for you. But in a sense, if you go to this meeting, it's gonna be harmful to you, at least in a pretend sense. So I get what he means, somewhat. Microbes or can be understood at the level of one important discussion. Here is the interplay between well-being and self-sacrifice. I'm trying to read this. I don't have my glasses on. Here's the interaction between well-being and self-sacrifice. One of the central features of this idea of well-being is that the individual's well-being or self-interest may well come into conflict with this kind of one between one's well-being or self-interest. Wait, what? On the one hand, and one's moral duties on the other, wherein such conflict arises, individuals may be required to self-sacrifice, to forego their self-interest in order to fulfill their overriding moral duties. This picture does seem to align in line with our moral phenomenology. As when we only wow, that's it. I have never seen this word before. Something's gonna be added to my vocabulary. What's this? Recalcitrantly. Whoa. Uh, what's the meaning for this? Definition of recalcitrant. It's an adjective form. Unwilling to obey rules or follow instructions. Difficult to control. You're so recalcitrancy. You're so recalcitrant. You say that to a kid. You're so recalcitrant. You're hard to deal with because you're so recalcitrant. Yeah. Recalcitrantly. Or oh. Okay, recalcitrantly. I had to break it down into these phenomena. Phonics is. What am I talking about? Phenomena. What? It's a phonology as we only recalcitrantly comply with our duties. At least on modern conception, it follows that any kind of well-being that's symmetrically described as self-interest and actions that are self-sacrificing will attribute to well-being a scope that is too wide. Such accounts are affected by scope problem. With these basics in mind, we're ready to approach the broad philosophical analysis of well-being in the next section and the theoretical connection between philosophy and psychology of well-being. Well-being in philosophy. I shouldn't be reading this paper. I really shouldn't be reading this paper. But okay, I'll just read the one part on well-being in philosophy. I don't think it's good. I've been recently trying to stay away from reading random papers. It's good to just get if I'm gonna read a paper, I want that author to upload multiple different papers related to the subject. If it's just a one-off paper, I don't think I'm gonna read it. And if it's just a one-off site, I don't think I want to read that, unless it's from let's say Stanford philosophy. Well-being in philosophy. The claim that well-being is an agent relative value has been recently challenged by Darwall 2002, and its agent neutrality has been more clearly defended by Darwall 2002, Reagan 2004, or Staley 2008. God, these stuff are from like 5-10 years ago. Or 20 years ago. No, these stuff are from 20 years ago. Jesus Christ. He's older than me. Philosophical discussion of well-being has traditionally focused on so-called theories of well-being. Why did they put so-called in front of theories of well-being? Now I'm starting to question what well-being is. Come on. These are two kinds of formal or explanatory and substantive and normative. A theory counts as substantive only if it directly attributes prudential value to certain items. Okay. Example, kinds of mental states, relationships, states of affair, activities. These theories of this kind provide answers to the question which things make someone's life go better for them. A substantive hedonist, for example, hedonist would also mention other goods, friendships, knowledge, autonomy, that are taken by them to be irreducible to pleasure states. A theory counts as formal only if it ties to identify why something is prudentially good, or as some would say, only if it identifies the prudential good or good for a value maker. Such as theory provides answers for the question, what makes something good for the individual. A formal hedonist, for example, will hold that pleasant pleasantness and only pleasantness is what makes substantive goods what they are. Others, however, will argue that it is satisfaction of an individual's desires that makes something prudentially good, and so on. I think this is what they meant by just these are just two major theories of well-being, one of hedonism and one of desire satisfactionism. I think this paper is adding more detail to the hedonistic part on that there's two type of hedonism, substantive hedonism, and then you're gonna have innuitive hedonism. Sorry, not oh my god, I'm getting confused. You're gonna have substantive hedonism slash inhibitive hedonism, and then you're gonna get formal hedonism. Uh, okay, I get it. Substantively good for what they are. However, we'll argue that it is the satisfaction of an individual desires that make something potentially good, and so on. The two kinds of theories stand in complementary relation. Hence, substantive. I skipped past. I need to. Where's that paper again? What am I looking for? Well-being in philosophy. Well-being, skepticism of well-being. There's a part on languages. I shouldn't skip over. Oh, brother, I should not have skipped over that. Jesus Christ. Should I just read that? I think I should. It's just 2 pages. Sorry, 5 pages. Kim, a high school, the language of well-being. Kim, a high school graduate, is considering a number of rather unsurprising questions. What should I become a doctor, endure a long period of study without income, but hopefully with having a meaningful job with a good income at the end? What are the chances of succeeding? Would I enjoy my studies and then my job? What would my life look like? Well, if I did succeed, would I have time to keep up mountain climbing and see my friends? Would I eventually have time for a rich family life? Perhaps it would be better for me to work as a postman, take the morning shift, be finished at 2 p.m., have time to go to mountain climbing after work, and meet up with my friends in the evening. If I liken surely work of whichever kind can never be good for me as climbing and being with people I care about, or should I rather devote my life to those in need, or the intellectual and artistic achievements? Are these kind of pursuits at all good for me? When answering this question, such as these moral and perhaps other kinds of value surely be at play. Yet, in at least clear, these common questions are motivated in large part by a concern with well-being or prudential value. The idea of prudential value is often found in the literature. These terms, well-being, what we have when our lives are going well for us, when we are living lives that we are not necessarily morally good, but good for us. So it doesn't care if you whatever. It doesn't care about the moral goodness of your life. It just cares if your life is good for you. So you can imagine that maybe that Hitler lived a very morally wrong life. Yeah, not maybe. He most certainly lived a terrible life, like something like Ted Bundy. Surely. Jesus Christ, I'm dying. Yeah, they lived a terribly morally wrong lives, but maybe those lives were good for their own good of whatever goodness they wanted, but good for them, yeah, for them only, not for others, I guess. Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm trying to keep up with this microphone, but I have to hold it up with my arm. What am I looking for? Okay, where am I going? I skipped off the page. Sometimes I whatever if I have to binge them. But good for us. Or again, it is commonly supposed that there is a single notion of individual well being that serves as the basis for the decisions of a single rational being, at least for those decisions in which he or she alone is concerned, that is to say, in which moral obligations and concerns for others can be left aside. Four general points about well being arise from these quotes. The terminology of well being, questions about prudential values or disvalue of lives, or alternatively, questions about what in an individual life is of prudential value or disvalue, are also discussed in terms of well being and ill being, welfare, benefit and harm, happiness and misery, what is good for and bad for an agent, as well as in terms of flourishing or thriving, a person's interest or a person's good, or a person's personal good. Generally, that is, there is an assumption or assumed relation of synonymy standing among these expressions, while we shall, for the most part, go along with this presumption, as we shall see in section 2, there are reasons not to equate conceptually happiness and well being. In fact, the pure good for us and bad for us also deserve special attention. Happiness and well being, in fact, the pure good or good for or bad for also deserve special attention. These expressions are often used in connection with the good or perfect function of organisms and artifacts, as in lubricant is good for the engine, rust is bad for the car, and smoking is not good for people. By these expressions, we typically mean that certain things are not good or bad for the proper functioning of the organism or artifact in question. This is not the sense of good for and bad for at issue with prudential value. Or better, it's not conceptually the case that well being is to be equated with good or perfect functioning. In this sense, this latter claim is true need, if true needs substantive argument. I remember one paper by that Hassan guy, or whoever it was. He was trying to make an argument against what is good for and what is bad for, and he got demolished. He tried to say it's good for a plant to get sun, therefore the plant's well-being is going up. He got completely demolished. I can't. This the response was the author made a distinction between what that is. They're not saying what is good for or what is that or this is that. They're saying that okay. I need to read back that paper. That last line, just to recall what he said. Um, I should. I can no. There's no point in looking it up right now. Good for and what is bad for at issue with prudential value, or better, it is not conceptually the case that well-being is to be equated with good or perfect functioning. In this sense, this latter claim, if true, needs substantive argument. In the absence of what, that it may well be true that smoking is bad for my organism, but prudentially good for me. Ooh. The axiological nature of prudential value. Now I need to look at what axiological nature. I know what axioms are. I don't know what axiological nature is, though. Philosophy terms explain. Axiology is like a big adventurous quest to figure out what happened, what things in life are super important and precious. Imagine you have a treasure map, but instead of searching for gold or diamonds, you're searching for things that make your life and the world better. Sort of like a personal value. Axiology is that map, showing you where to look and how to find these special values in your life and society. Simply put, axiology is a fancy term for the study of values. When we think about what what's important to us, such as being honest or making sure everyone is treated fairly. That's axiology doing work. It helps us understand why some actions feel right while others don't, and why we get joy from beautiful things like art and nature. So axiology is pretty much a cool toolbox that we use to figure out which tools or values we need to build a better life and world. Okay, types of axiology. There are two main favors of axiology that people like to explore. Each have different types of values. Let's check them out. Ethics. This is the heart to a heart talk of axiology. Imagine you found a wallet on the street. Ethics is that little voice in your head debating whether to return it or to keep it. It is all about what actions are right or wrong. Asking questions like, should I help out a friend in need? Ethic revolves around our values for honesty, kindness, and fairness, the moral compass that guides how we treat others. Aesthetics. This slice of axiology is about the beauty in life, like a breathtaking sunset or a moving piece of music. But it is more than saying that's pretty. It wonders what's beautiful and why do certain things tug at our heartstrings. Aesthetics dig into the values of for what beautiful and meaningful art is, nature and even everyday objects. It's about appreciating and finding joy in the world around us. Here are some examples of axiology. Here are a few real life scenarios whereby axiology sneaks in and help us make choices. A friend tells us the joke that you find meaning, and you decide not to laugh. You value kindness and respect. Your friend tells a joke that you find meaning, and you decide not to laugh. You value kindness and respect, so you choose not to support something hurtful, even if it's meant as a joke. Oh, so if a friend makes fun of something you find meaningful. Okay. You're at a crossroad. Take a high paying job that you won't like, or lower paying one that you'll love. Your choice will reflect your value, money, or happiness. When picking out a birthday gift for a friend, you think hard about what they enjoy. This shows you value thoughtfulness and friendship. Oh, it's about what people value. Okay. In school, you choose to work on a project about saving the environment. This choice shows you value nature and want to learn about protecting the earth. You get extra change from a cashier and decide to return it. Your action is influenced by values of honesty and integrity, showing what you stand for. Why is axiology important? Understanding the whys behind what we care about is what makes axiology so cool and important, like an architect using a blueprint to build a strong and beautiful house. Axiology gives us the plan we need to build our lives and communities in ways that line up with what is important for us. For instance, if a group of people decide that protecting the environment at the top of their values, is a top value, they might start recycling programs or protecting parks to show that value is action. But axiology isn't just about grand things, it also pops up not so big moments. Picture deciding what to watch, listen, or to even eat for lunch. Your choices come down to what you value, whether that learning something new, having fun, or staying healthy. Plus, the values you pick up from your family, friends, and experiences shape who you are and how you see the world. That's pretty powerful stuff. That sounds like something Jordan Peterson would say. That's pretty powerful stuff. And if you let that dragon inside of your soul, when you go down spiraling down um down Carl Jung's spiritual paradigm of what is, I don't know, I'm not funny, but it, I hope that guy's doing well. I heard that he's in the hospital. or he's in the hospital dealing with some sort of issue of pneumonia or something like that. Unfortunate. Anyways, origin of axiology. Our tour of axiology started in ancient Greece with some pretty wise folks asking big questions about life. But the actual term axiology first popped up when a wise German philosopher named Wilhelm Wilhelm Wind Wilhelm Band. That is one like uh tongue tongue tie for a name. Wilhelm Wind Wilhelm Wind Wilhelm. Anyways, use it to in his late 1800s. Ever since then, people have been dividing into the this part of philosophy, trying to figure out what values really mean for us, to us all. Controversies in axiology. Of course, not everyone picks up the same values or put them in the same sort of order. That's where things get a bit messy. Some folks might put freedom at the top of their list, a full-born American, I don't know, while others might vote for safety and a sense of community. And then there's the whole debate over whether our values are set in stone for everyone or just they're more like personal favors that can change and vary from day to day. Yep, the world's value can be pretty sticky. Sticky, icky. Oh, dude, I am brain rotted. I don't know. And full of debates. Other important aspects of axiology, along with ethics and aesthetics. Axiology also wades in different waters of economic value. This deals with what makes something worth cash and how people are willing to pay. So when you're trying to decide how much to spend on a new pair of shoes, you're actually doing a bit of axiology. You're trying to see what you value. To wrap things up, axiology is like a Swiss Army knife for philosophy. It got all these nifty tools that not only help with values, but also links up with other big philosophical ideas about what we know and what's out there in the universe. Pretty handy, right? Pretty handy, right? Um, where was I? What was I doing? I kind of forgot. Oh, I was reading that one bit. I'm just kidding. I know what I'm doing. Kinda. The axiological nature. So, if axiology is like a roadmap towards your values to which you support, and nature is something that is fundamental. Wait, nature is something that is always occurrent within okay, normativity in nature. I swear I read that. So, nature is gonna be definition of nature is that something's this thing's always gonna be apparent. It's not gonna be on statistics. It will always be present in some sense within that environment. If axiology is about value, then the value, then what I'm talking when it's gonna be about value and nature. So it's gonna be this value is gonna be present. So if I were to sum this word up, axiological nature just means the this value is gonna always be there in some sense present within this world. It's not gonna be on statistical occurrence, but it's gonna always be present in some sense. This a fact of the world, such as that somewhere in the world it is raining. This is just a part of nature. Um, so this value is gonna be fundamental, something that will always be expected. I haven't looked at what axiological nature means, but I'm trying to like trying to get it. I'll look on GPT. I'll just scurry away and ask GPT, but that's my definition for now. Okay, uh, from reading what I just read and some base knowledge on what nature means, according to another paper or book. Um, so it might just mean that this value is fundamental. Okay, let's see what it means. If I'm wrong, I'm gonna feel so bad. I swear to God, I did all that. What does actually? Whew, okay. The first axiological nature refers ChatGPT 5 instant value related aspects of value based characters of something. Okay. The word axiology comes from axiological comes from the word axiology, the philosophical study of value, from the Greek axios, word of value or logos. Study axiology deals with the questions like what things are good or bad, what makes something valuable, what do we decide, what moral, aesthetic, or intrinsic value. So when something is described as axiological, it's being discussed in terms of its value, worth, or importance, especially moral or ethical value. Okay. Trying to scroll down, but it's pretty hard. There you go. What nature means here? Nature means the essence. I knew it. I did. Big. Finally, critical thinking at work. It's rare, but it happens. Nature means the essence, character, or underlying quality of something. Therefore, axiological nature means the value based or the value based or evaluative character of something, the way it relates to the notion of good or bad, right or wrong. Value based evaluative character of something is how you evaluate something in regards to what's good, wrong, right, blah, blah, blah. So instead, the axiological nature of happiness, it means the way happiness is valued or described. Okay, means judgments. It just moral judgments are not just factual, but involve assigning values. This okay. I don't think that was a really okay. That was good. The axiological nature of prudential value. So how we value prudential value. In regards to good, bad, and all that sorts. As some of the above remarks suggest, at the conceptual level, prudential value is neither moral nor aesthetic, nor perfectionist. It is arguably a kind of value irreducible to any other kind, which may nonetheless stand in various substantive relations. I need to look what I mean by irreducible. Mm-hmm. Good. You're quoting a passage from an unpacking the prudential value in terms specific. What the passage is saying, the axiological nature of prudential value, as some above remarks suggest, at the conceptual level, prudential value is neither moral nor aesthetic nor perfectionist value. It is arguably a kind of value irreducible to any other kind. This means the author is asking, what is kind of prudential? What kind of value is prudential value? That's the axiological nature question. Okay. Prudential value equal what is good or bad for someone. Um, what benefits or harm person's own well-being. Example is friendship, health, pleasure, autonomy might have prudential value because they make your life go better for you. Contrast, moral value is about what is right or wrong, honesty and fairness. Aesthetic, I don't know if I agree that's what moral value means, but maybe there's different ways. Um, is about beauty or artistic merit. Perfectionist value is about realizing one's conceptual capacities or virtues, becoming more excellent or complete. Okay. So prudential value concerns individual well-being, not moral duties or beauty. Axiological nature in this context. When the author talks about axiological nature of prudential value, they're saying what category of goodness does prudential value belong to? The answer is not moral, not aesthetic, not perfectionist. It is its own category of value. So prudential value is being treated as a distinct kind of intrinsic goodness, unique to what makes life good for one's living in. Okay, I get it. Step 4, why they say it's irreducible to any other kind. This means you can't fully explain or analyze potential value by turning it to something else like morality or beauty. For example, saying pleasure is good because it's morally right misses the point. It's good for you not because it's moral. Uh, Saying life with art and virtue is best because it's beautiful also misses the point. It might aesthetically good, but prudential value concerns personal welfare, what is good for oneself, regardless if it's moral, if you're living a morally good life. So the author claims prudential value has its own independent axiological status, a unique way something can be good. Step 5, simplified summary. The axiological nature of prudential value refers to what kind of goodness prudential value represents. Is not moral goodness, right or wrong, not aesthetic goodness, beautiful, and not perfectionist. It's a distinct kind of value, the kind that concerns with what makes a person's life goes well for them. Okay. Which is irreducible to any other kind, which may nonetheless stand in various substantive relationships to them. Hence, for example, if we admit that pleasure has prudential value, the alleged truth claim evil pleasures are not good for us cannot be conceptual and must be argued substantially, as we shall see. However, the claim that well-being is not reducible to other values has been object to a lot of skepticism. The normativity of well-being. There is a widespread agreement that the effect of well-being is both a descriptive and normative concept. As Tiberius and Placias, 2008, page 242, claim that the term well-being aims to pick up out of an empirical phenomena that can be measured, compared, and one hopes realize in people's lives. To achieve well-being is to enjoy a certain kind of life or set of experiences that we can investigate and influence. Yet, well-being also has normative significance. Example, it involves reasons. If A is better for you than B, ceteris paribus, you subservient, all else being equal, you have more reason to do A. While very few disagree with this claim, growing disagreement is to be encountered with respect to the kind of normativity well-being is to be taken to involve. The standard view is that well-being is an agent relative value. I don't know. It gives reason to the agent whose well-being it is. Hence, if something increases my well-being, then I have reason to desire it and pursue it. And similarly for you and your well-being, him and his well-being, etc. In each case, the reason given fact for the agent is that his or her good would be contributed to or not diminished. It is less clear, however, what the standard view would hold with regards to the agent neutrality of well-being. Agent neutrality here means that everyone has a reason to promote everyone's well-being, including his or her own. For every agent, the reason given fact is that someone good would be promoted or not diminished. Where is my glasses? I'm like Velma. I found it. Okay. Number 4. The limits of the concept of well-being. The limits of the concept of well-being. This is a question can be understood at the level of the subject's well-being level. What kind of entities can have well-being beside human beings, non-humans, animals, plants and trees, microbes, etc.? Or it can be understood at the level of the kind of states, activities, or choices that can be counted as enhancing someone's well-being. One important discussion here is the interplay between well-being and self-sacrifice. One of the central features of the idea of well-being is that individuals' well-being or self-interest may well compete or come into conflict with other demands placed on the individual. Perhaps the most common conflict of this kind is going to be between well-being or self-interest on the one hand and one's moral duties on the other. When such conflicts arise, individuals may be required to self sacrifice to forego their self interest in order to fulfill their overriding moral duties. This picture does seem in line with our moral phenomenology, as well as when we only recalcitrant. So, the recalcitrant just means disobeying rules. If we only recalcitrantly comply with our duties, so I guess recalcitrantly comply would just mean revoltly, like get like you can imagine that someone is doing community service, maybe a prisoner. Let's say they're not being forced to. Well, no. Let's say they're being forced to. They're upset that they gotta do it. So if someone only recalcitrantly comply, then mm, okay, I see. On this picture, the respective extension of well-being and self-sacrifice exclude each other. At least one modern conception, it follows that any account of well-being that symmetrically describes as self-interested accounts that are self-sacrificing will contribute to well-being. A scope that is too wide, such accounts are affected by the scope problem. I think I've heard about the scope. I've not heard about it. I've seen some papers on field papers titled the scope problem. I've seen. I'll check it right now. There you go. Oh, so a simple solution to the scope problem 2025. I think even the author I'm reading about actually talked about it. According to desire satisfactionism of theory of well-being, something is good for me to the extent that I desire it. The theory faces the scope problem. Many of the things I desire intuitively lie beyond the scope of my welfare. Here I argue that a simple solution to this problem is available. First, I suggest this is a general feature of desire that they can differ not only in objects but also in their targets. Should I read this paper right now? Should I finish the one I'm reading? Did anyone? No one cite this work. That's unfortunate. Okay. So problem with these basics in mind, we are ready to broad philosophical analysis of well-being in the next section and the theoretical connections between the philosophy and psychology of well-being in the section after that. The claim that well-being is an agent relative value has been recently challenged, blah blah blah, and the agent neutrality has been defended quite a bit. Agent neutrality. Agent. I kind of forgot what that was a second ago, so I'm gonna look it up again. Agent neutrality. Da da. Philosophical discussions of well-being has traditionally focused on so-called well-being theories. Theories of well-being. These are two kinds: formal or substantive, enumerative or explanatory. Formal and substantive. A theory counts as substantive only if it directly attributes prudential value to a certain item. Example kinds of mental states, relationship states of a fear and activity. Theories of this kind provide answers to the question which things make someone's life go better for them. A substantive hedonist, for example, someone who claims that only pleasure mental states are potentially good, where non-hedonists would also mention that other goods, friendships, knowledge, autonomy, etc., that are taken by them to be irreducible to pleasures mental states. A theory counts as formal only if it tries to identify why something is potentially good, or as some would say, only if it identifies the potential or good for value maker. Such a theory provides answers to the question what makes something good for the individual. A formal hedonist, for example, will hold pleasantness and other pleasantness is what makes substantive good for what they are. Others, however, will argue that it is the satisfaction of an individual desires that makes something good potentially good, and so on. Uh, the two kinds of theories stand in a complementary relation, hence a substantive hedonist will typically be a formal hedonist. Okay. Holding that pleasantness is what makes pleasure good for an individual. Yet it is logically possible and in fact a live option to combine substantial hedonism and other formal outlooks. One may, for example, hold that what makes pleasure mental states potentially good is the fact that they fulfill one of individual's desires. These of well-being are also often categorized as being either subjective or objective. Subjectivism states that our nothing can intrinsically enhance the quality of an individual's life unless that person desires or endorses that thing, or unless that person would desire or endorse that thing under idealized conditions, i.e., perfect rationality or full information. Okay, I think I can return back to the paper. I'll read one more thing on prudentials though. Oxford. Oxford didn't give me no answers. Maybe if I look on Anna's archive, I'll find something. I haven't used Anna's archive in a long while. I don't even know if it works. Or it got shut down. Oh, it works. The home screen works. I'll just look for the most recent things on Anna's archive. Um, the newest thing is from 2012. Um, there's not much information. Maybe I should look Prudential. This. Oh my God, the servers are down. All the servers are down. Okay, I had to do something real quick. Only 4 minutes ago. Anna's archive. What's on Anna's archive? I'll just download these two books. And they're both PDF files. So it's pretty good. Moral choices for a future self. And okay, normative pluralism. I don't know what. Oh my God, it's not working. I keep on trying and it's not working. Dude, the whole site is shut down. Okay, download the other one. I'll read through the book, at least the parts that I find interesting. Maybe next time. Never mind. You can't download anything. If you're a visitor of this website, please try again in a few minutes. If you're an owner of this website, there's an issue between Cloudflare Cache and your original website server. Bro, second I try to use download now. Oh, I don't know. It worked. Please don't say this is in another language. Oh, it's from Routledge Philosophy. I don't want to show the book because I don't want to get in trouble. And there's no table of there is. This book is only 135 pages. Oh, this isn't even a book. This is like an article. How do we perceive our future selves? The neurobehavioral basis of one perceptions of future selves too. What is the nature of our relationships in which we stand with our future selves in practical moral issues of one perception of future selves? How should we treat our future selves? How does the moral theory of prudence work in practice? Application of theory to advance care. That's interesting. I'm scrolling through it. Future self continuity, self mental stimulation of the future self, conceptual level of well-being, conceptual level of object, temporal discounting. Okay, sounds interesting. I'll get the other book too. These books sound interesting, but I want this book badly. Okay, there you go. 2 times the charm. Normative pluralism. I don't know what normative pluralism is. I keep learning more stuff. Um, what's gonna be normative pluralism? I swear, the guy I'm reading about right now, Jen Jonathan. Uh, why is the first thing I search up is normative pluralism worthy of the name is false? Normative pluralism revolving the conflict between. How many people downloaded this? I think moral problems, skepticism, thinkers, moral reasons, potential reasons, all things considered, project demoralization. Is this another book or an article? Reasons, Roger Crisp, Reasons and the Goods. The British moral philosopher Henry Sidgwick described the challenge of resolving the conflict between what prudential requires for an individual and what morality requires of an individual as a profoundest problem in ethics. This chapter investigates one approach to address what could be called Sedgwick's dualism of the practical reason of demoralization, universal welfareism, DUI, a view originally proposed by Roger Crisp in Reasons and the Good. The chapter begins with surveying different approaches to resolve the problem of Sedgwick's dualism and goes on to look at the distinctive way DUI solves dualism. I argue that DUI is not a solution. in the conventional sense, and although it does lead to the dissolution of dualism, I show that the approach offers important insights both into dualism itself and into what kind of commitments are required to solve it. I should look into what Jen Johnson. She talks about. Sometimes I have to look up his name because he talks about this. Pretty. He did bring up. He did talk about a paper. He did write a whole paper on it. So since I'm just gonna be a one philosopher guy for now, because I want to read through most of his works, because what most of his works is gonna be what I need to understand a lot of these stuff. A causal account. There's one. I swear. He talks about pluralism. Plural harm, plural problems. The counterfactual comparative account of harm faces problems in cases involving overdetermination and preemption. An influential strategy for dealing with these problems are drawing suggestions made by Derek Pfiff is appeal to plural harm. Several event together harming someone. We argue that most well-known versions of this strategy, due to needed feed as well as is fatally flawed. Brother. So he believes it's false. And because I'm an NPC, I'm going to say pluralism is false. I read what am I looking at? Hmm. Okay, there you go. I got the book. Let's see what it is. Normative pluralism. Normative pluralism. I don't know what it is. Whoa, this book's 249 pages. It's a long table of contents. Introduction, what we ought to do, topic scopes, aims, normative pluralism, value pluralism, separate topics, structure of the normative concept of out, introduction, morality and prudence as normative sources, a non-relation view, normative prudence as competing theories of out, normative pluralism and incomparable outs. Mm, I want to skip over the part. Well, I want to see this part. What is what? And none of this is no one thought to embed these links. So I gotta scroll down. Topics, aim, procedure, structure the normative concepts of out, non-relation view, normative prudence, uh, morality and prudence as complete in theories of how. I don't know what that. What? Okay. Um, the unqualified out. Oh, where is this? I'm just gonna look up prudential reasoning. And then use the find button in that paper. What's the first? I'll put it in GPT and I'll ask it what page I should read to understand prudential reasons further. Normative prudential reasons could be in fact false. This need not result from any skepticism about normativity or out in general. In absence of broader generic out, we're left with more particular outs in regards. Okay. hmm Well, I found a good part. Morality and prudence. I finally found it. Central to normative prudism is the idea of multitude of normative sources called source pluralism. The idea that I don't care for that. Why the prudence requires you to quit smoking. There, what? Didn't I just read a paper that prudence doesn't require anyone to quit smoking? What I'm talking about. In addition, normative requirement. It seems neutral to say that these sources issue outs. To see why this is the case, we can look at the how sources of such as morality, prudence functions when they issue requirements. For an easy example, take prudence. Suppose prudence requires you to quit smoking, maybe to make your life better. But what if smoking makes your life better? Wouldn't that be a prudential reason to keep on smoking? Well, it's okay. Okay. I see. Okay. What am I talking about? Suppose prudence requires you to quit smoking. It seems that it as if this fact can be explained by pointing to certain features concerning smoking and showing that these features that favor quitting, and they also do a greater extent than other features concerning smoking can against quitting. So while smoking sometimes enable you to calm your nerves and to look cool, it also it also causes serious health risk and bad breath, and it's a drain on your finances. The fact that prudence, what is prudence? I know what prudential reason is, but I don't even know what prudence is. The quality of being prudent. Jesus, whoever wrote this definition needs to be, something bad needs to happen to them. You need to have their prudential value lowered. Uh, Prudential is the ability to govern and discipline oneself by use of reason. It's classically considered to be a virtue, or in particular, one of the four cardinal virtues. What prudence is the quality of being careful in avoiding risking decisions or actions, learning how to use the word in different contexts. See examples from Cambridge. Okay, I understand. Oh, someone responded. That's because. What am I doing? I'm so scatterbrained sometimes. That prudence requires you to quit smoking, therefore seemingly explain. Exp- Bro, again, with prudence is different from prudential. Prudential is different. Prudence is the quality of being careful and avoiding risking decision or actions. Okay, being careful or avoiding decisions. That prudence requires you to quit smoking, therefore seems explainable by features that on balance or favor the action. Same way the reasons explain outs. The claim that sources such as prudence and morality issue outs also seems threatened by the fact that we sometimes use what? Locution. New word added to the vocab. What does locution mean? A word or phrase, especially with regards to style or idioms. I have no idea what that means. Locution. I got it right. Locution is a word or phrase, someone's style of speaking, or the meaning or reference of something they say. Okay, okay. So we sometimes use locutions such as "you morally out to f" or "you prudentially out to f." The features referred to above seems to give an explanation for why you prudentially out to quit smoking. But why do we sometimes say prudentially out rather than just out with no modifying adverb? And why do we say these reasons are prudential reasons rather than just reasons? To understand this, it's useful to look at how morality would treat the same question of whether or not to quit smoking. Let us assume that morality also requires us to quit smoking. However, if it does require this, the explanation for this fact would seem to be different from the explanation for the fact that prudence requires. For one thing, there might be features favoring this action that do not play a role in explaining why you're prudentially required to stop smoking. Continuing to smoke would mean, for example, financially supporting the tobacco industry, which is arguably responsible for manipulating poor people into by being addicted to health damaging expensive articles. This consideration does not play any role in explaining why you are potentially required to stop smoking. Conversely, if it seems that um, it seems that at least on some theories of morality, some of the facts that played a role in establishing the prudential requirement play no role at all for explaining the moral requirement. Okay. Arguably, the fact is, if it's a fact that smoking makes you look cool, does not appear relevant for whether you are morally required to stop. Furthermore, some other features that play the same role is in establishing both requirements seem to do different extents. The fact that smoking causes bad breath may matter morally since bad breath causes discomfort to others. However, it seems safe to say that if it matters for determining whether you are morally required to stop smoking, it does so marginally, very small. This discomfort is relatively insignificant from a moral point of view. However, it seems to matter much more for whether you are potentially required to stop smoking, since bad breath, for example, decreases your chances of finding a partner, which we can stipulate. Uh, I'm not saying that this fact could play a role in determining whether you are potentially required to stop smoking. I'm merely stipulating that this case is not. It could, for example, play a potential role if you are conscientious and care deeply for the poor, or if you have public image to maintain. The extent to which plays a potential role seems to depend on your personal psychology and theories of the code prudential to be a significant aim or interest of yours. In principle, we can imagine features that count in opposite directions, morally and prudentially. On certain views, prudential, the fact that some action will prudentially in well for my pleasure, but I think I'll read this book later. It seems interesting, especially that one chapter in the book. But I want to finish this. I haven't. I wanted to read this an hour and 30 minutes ago, but it looks like I forgot this mission. I'll do that now. Well, this is an easy read. So I'll just blitz right through it. A little bit of bragging on my side. Jen Johnson, Ollie Briggsburg, Simple Analysis for Harm defend what they call the negative influence on well-being account NIWA of harm. NIWA captures the intuitive first thought that harming someone means adversely affecting that person's well-being. In other words, an event harms an individual if and only if it has negative adverse influence on an individual's well-being. This simple account takes seriously the idea that harm is fundamentally about making someone worse off in terms of their own good or welfare. Unlike more complex theories, NIWA wholeheartedly embraces the first thought, um, embraces the connection between harm and well-being, and claim an event negatively affects someone's well-being is both necessary and sufficient for it to cause harm. I should look up. I have both these terms that I need to read into. I have it on my Stanford's definition that I need to read through list for it to count as harm. Jonasson and Risberg thus proposed NIWA as a straightforward analysis of the concept harm, avoiding convoluted conditions or counterfactual comparisons. If something lowers or impairs your well-being, then it harms you. Conversely, if it does not affect your well-being at all, it does not harm you on this view. I don't know. I feel like this always needs a bit of always needs some part. Well, I understand what it means. I actually understand what it means. I do. It just needs more. If I were to write this, I would add a open bracket and closed bracket, which inside would just describe what lifetime well-being is. Because right here, it needs to expand on what well-being is. Because when someone hears well-being, they might think, oh, it's about your current status of well-being, temporal well-being. So that just needs to be explained a little bit more on my just a bit criticism of what GPT put place, but it's because of my background knowledge. Because I just whoa, the stutter is insane. I already read the paper before that I'm asking for a review of, so I can understand the background knowledge of maybe what it's trying to say. But if someone were to read this, they might not understand exactly what they mean. Or I think they should have given a definition of well-being here as well, because I don't think this is a good definition of well-being. Because it I don't think any definition of any word that involves the word is a good definition of that word. I think it's a bit circular, because yeah, well-being could be harm to an individual if only if negative or adversely influence on the individual well-being. I don't think anyone really understands what that means until they understand what well-being is. I think it's up to the authors to tell me, up to the GP to really explain what well-being is in this context, even though I know what it means. This is another interesting one. Involves both necessary and sufficient. I think this should be explained as well, because even I don't really understand what they mean by necessary and sufficient, because I haven't read about that topic right now. All I know about necessary condition is that it must it's gonna be needed for something, and sufficient is not gonna be really needed, but it's a part of. I think I don't. I've heard court in another debate talk about necessary and sufficient, but I don't think it'd be fair to say that I really understand these terms unless I actually read into them, like I did for axiological nature, or prudential reasoning or prudence. Those are words that I kind of understand because I looked into them a while ago. But these words, it would be unfair to say that I understand what necessary and sufficient is, especially in a philosophical context. Because I have them set up on a Stanford reading list, but I haven't read it before because I haven't been able to find the time. That's why some of these live streams are from 6 to 5 days ago, because I get overwhelmed with my current business in life. So it's expected, but I could there are like gaps in free time. I could have that I could make these videos, but I think it's more so a lack of discipline on my end to keep on pushing these out. But nonetheless, I think I just needed. I think when my microphone broke, if I were to blame it on anything, I lost a bit of motivation to keep on making these live streams, because I not even I like to listen to videos with poor microphone quality. Right now, I'm using FI E. It was the second microphone I've ever had. I found it in my suitcase. But I got another microphone that sounds much better than this. This microphone's a bit on the quieter end, so it's a bit difficult to listen to unless you boost your own volume. And it doesn't have a pop filter, so I can imagine that all the time I say any P words that have any breathy word that that causes a burst of breath is gonna cause this microphone a lot of issues. So I'm just gonna try to avoid. Well, I guess I can't avoid anything, but nonetheless, it's good to just keep the continuity of the content going instead of just stopping intermediately for reasons that are dismissible in the future when I look back in hindsight. Comparison: if something lowers or impairs your well-being, then it harms you. Conversely, if it does not affect your well-being at all, it does not harm you on this view. Notably, NIWA is meant to be a conceptual account of harm, not merely a linguistic or contextual definition. It defines harm with a kind of negative impact on prudential value, personal welfare. The authors also endorse a parallel account of benefit, the positive influence on well-being account (PIWA), which defines benefit in as positively affecting well-being. This symmetry underscores that harming and benefiting are two sides of the same coin. Both are understood in terms of influence on individuals' well-being. By grounding harm in well-being, NIWA aligns with our normative sense of why harm matters because they make someone's life go worse. Indeed, Johnson and Risberg note that it is prudentially or morally significant whether an action affects someone's well-being. Thus, NIWA also neatly explains why harming someone is per tanto wrong, because it by definition reduces their well-being, and similarly, we have prudential reasons to avoid being harmed and moral reason not to harm others. Well-being, prudential value, neutrality, and temporal versus lifetime well-being. Well-being in this context refers to what is good or bad for an individual, sometimes called prudential value or welfare. It is essentially the quality of life from the perspective of the person who lives it. Johnson and Risberg use the notion of well-being in a standard philosophical sense, compatible with the major theories of hedonism, well-being, and pleasure minus pain, desire satisfactionism, or objectivist account. All these theories agree that certain mental uh where is it? All these agree that certain mental or psychological states are necessary for positive or negative well-being. For example, on hedonism, pleasure contributes to positive well-being and pain uh, to negative well-being. On desire-based views, getting what one desires or wants to getting what one wants to add to well-being while frustrating other desires detract from it. The common thread is that a being must have some sort of experimental or mental life for the concept of good or bad for that being applied. Thus, Jonathan and colleagues assume that creatures incapable of feeling, desiring, or experiencing cannot have well being in the first place. Well being is essentially the prudential value of one's life, how well one life goes for for oneself. So is essentially potential value of one life, how well one life goes for oneself, what someone values in their life. Okay. Importantly, well-being is often thought of as common in degrees along a scale. Positive well-being means life is going well, pleasure, fulfillment, happiness. Negative well-being means life is going poorly, nor so that just means suffering, frustrated, misery. And a neutral well-being level would be a life that is neither positive or negative, good for the person, perhaps a life of zero net value, but nonetheless they're on the scale. Jonathan and Risberg discuss whether a being can have a zero well-being versus having no well-being level at all. The distinction can be subtle, but it might also possible that some entities simply do not register on the well-being scale at all. They lack any prudential value status. For example, an ordinary computer has no pleasure or pain and no interest. Intuitively, we would say it has zero welfare, but rather than concepts of welfare does not apply to it. As Jonathan and Elkna note, bringing up a laptop into existence does not increase the sum of the world's welfare or poverty. The computer is not even in competition on the welfare scale. I think this is a great point. Um, it just shows a bit absurd these counter questions that I talked about initially are. If we consider that a rock has a well-being to which can go bad for it, I think you'd have to then say that there's an increased amount of suffering in the world. When you step over a rock, are you truly harming that rock's well-being? Um, and can we then conclude that the suffering in the world has risen up from the fact that you stepped on a rock? I think that'd be a bit absurd, at least to me. It'd be really ridiculous because if a rock has a well-being, why don't microbes have well-being? Why when you wash your hands, the suffering in the world doesn't go up? Under your view, everything suffering should be at an all-time peak. When people wash their hands, everything should like. Anyways, yeah. By contrast, because if a Dell laptop had a or financial is on the financial scale, which means somehow he has the capacity to gain wealth, which I don't find to be plausible, and the authors came to the same conclusion. And we'd have to say people in debt are poorer than a laptop. Would that make much sense? I don't think it would make much sense. Because then we'd have to say that a laptop is somehow richer than someone who is in negative debt. Or I don't think that makes much sense, at least to me, under my intuitions or stuff like that. And I don't think it in the broader scale makes sense. Maybe if yeah, I don't think it makes sense. The computer is not even in the competition on the welfare scale. This is because the computer lacks capacity for welfare properties, no feelings, no desires. By contrast, a human with no money can meaningfully be said to have zero wealth, a position on the financial scale, because humans have the capacity for wealth. They could own money even if currently they have none. The computer analogy suggests that having no well being at all is different from having neutral well being, and deciding factor is whether the entity has the internal capacity for the good and bad that constitute well being. Jonathan and Risberg find it plausible that capacity for well being is required to have a well being level, positive, negative, or zero. Another key distinction in their framework is between temporal well being and lifetime well being. A temporal well being is how well off someone is at a particular time or during specific period. We often say things like he was worse off last year than he is now, indicating that well being can be evaluated over intervals. In contrast, an individual's life well-being level, sometimes called overall aggregation well-being, is in the degree of well-being of their life as a whole, considering all the ups and downs. Jonathan, and Risberg do not commit to a precise formula for lifetime well-being. It could be the sum of experiences minus pains, an average, or some more complex aggregation. But the important point is that it's an overall assessment of how good a life was for that person living it. They stipulate that a being has lifetime well-being level if and only if it has some temporal well-being level at some time. In other words, to even talk about your overall well-being, there must be at least one moment in your existence at which you were either doing well or doing or poorly, even if that moment was very brief. If there was never any time that things were even good or bad for you, then as a whole your life cannot be evaluated on well-being scale effectively. You have no lifetime well-being level at all. I mean, there's one problem I guess I have when I'm reading through this. Maybe it's in other words, to even talk about your well-being, there must be at least one moment at which things are either going doing poorly, even if that moment was very brief. Because what about zero? If zero isn't poorly nor is it bad, but rather in the middle of not experiencing anything good or bad, well, I guess no. I think I understand. I think I understand. Because even if someone's on a neutral scale on the well-being level, uh, if they're not experiencing anything bad or good, if you um negatively affect their well-being from zero to worse, then it could be said you let them worse off than they were before. Because let's say I have $0 in my bank account, and the government takes or put me in debt to $100. Now I went from zero to negative 100. It could be said that I'm now worse off than I was, even if I had only $0. So even if you only have a zero well-being level, if someone takes or puts you in debt, make your life worse off than it would have been if you had not died, then you'd be harmed. I get it. I get it. I get it. Okay. In other words, to even talk about your well-being level, overall well-being, there must have been at least one moment in your existence at which you were either doing well or poorly, even if that moment was very brief. If there was never any, I don't know why my voice sounds like this right now, but it's fine. Um, that things were even a little good or bad for you when your whole life cannot be evaluated on well-being scale effectively, you have no lifetime well-being at all. This will be crucial when we consider entities like fetuses or permanently unconscious patients. Prudential value is essentially synonymous with with well-being in this context. It refers to what has value for the individual's own sake. Jonathan and Risberg, and I hope I'm saying this right. Risberg analysis treats harm and benefit in terms of changes to prudential value. So when we say an event adversely affects someone's well-being, we mean it lowers their potential value of their life, either making their current state worse or reducing the goodness in their lives as a whole. A person's lifetime potential value could be thought of as the total amount of good minus bad in their life. If an event reduces the total, it has harmed them in a lifetime sense. If it increases it, it has benefited them. NIWA does not require us to pin down a single theory of well-being consistent. It works in tandem with any reasonable account of pleasure, pain, pleasure, desires. I can't believe that girl asked me that rocks have well-being. I'm just upset. I don't know. Did anyways. Anyway, I just laugh. I don't know. Pleasure, desire, satisfaction. So long as we can, say whether someone makes the person life goes better or worse. Finally, Jonathan and Risberg introduced what they call well-being requirement in the abortion-focused paper, which neatly ties these ideas together. In order for an event to harm an individual, the individual has to occupy a lifetime well-being level. In simpler terms, a necessary condition for being harmed is that the individual has some well-being level to speak of. If a being cannot be said to even minimally, can be said to can said to be even minimally well off or ill off, either at that moment or at any point in its existence, and nothing counts as harming. This requirement is actually implicit in like all major accounts of harm. For example, the standard counterfactual comparative account says that an event harms you if you're worse off than you'd otherwise have been in terms of lifetime well-being. Okay, but to be worse off, you must have a level of well-being in both scenarios, meaning you do have well-being level to get lowered. Similarly, causal accounts that define harm in terms of causing a drop in well-being or causing negative well-being states is also presupposes that individuals have well-being level that can be dropped or go negative. So the well-being requirement is quite commonsensical. If an entity has no well-being, I'm talking in the wrong part of my. If an entity has no well-being at all, it cannot be made worse off. We will see how this requirement plays a pivotal role in arguing about fetuses and abortion. Who can and cannot be harmed? Ants, zygotes, and the capacities for well-being. I brought up ants. I made sure to ask it about ants because someone was writing a message to Nathan Nobis in his comment section trying to like debunk the guy. They were basically harassing Nathan Nobis, saying something like, "What if I fall asleep? Should I die?" And it's at least it's just really weak criticisms of his like. Even though I no longer believe Nathan Nobis's consciousness argument is that good, I think all the criticisms against it, posited by this person, was really bad. The consciousness argument would easily like bypass this person's sleeping criticism, because in the consciousness argument, you're gonna have PC and FC. PC is gonna be past consciousness as a necessary condition, and FC is gonna be a sufficient condition for that subject. So of course, it's gonna be in conjunction to one another. So someone who is sleeping, of course, is gonna have past consciousness, and also is gonna have future consciousness, because they're gonna recover or just come out or regain their consciousness again. So I don't see the criticism there. Same with the coma patient. I don't see the criticism there neither. Um, and even in this other case, I've heard someone say, I even use this argument myself when I'm LARPing as pro life, though I don't like to LARP sometimes. What if someone gets hit in their brain and they lose a part of their cerebral cortex, and this part of their cerebral cortex hypothetically is gonna grow back in 9 months, and they say to you, "Isn't this similar to the fetus?" But I don't think this is true, because even in under Nathan Nobis's unconsciousness argument, if PC is gonna be a necessary condition, then that person who's gonna recover in the future from this in 9 months already meets a condition, a PC. So the fetus, the fetus doesn't meet the PC condition, so it never has a window open for it. So I just don't see the point of that criticism at all. Um, I've heard people argue, the only decent argument I've heard against PC and FC, necessary and sufficient, have been people pressing the notion of future consciousness, and saying that the argument depends on future consciousness. Whether or not those arguments are good, I don't know. I rather not get into it. Uh, it seems pointless to me. So actually, so in that criticism that guy had, he brought up ants. He said, "Do you value ants, and do you value dogs and stuff like that?" Um, it would depend on if ants have, because part of Nathan Nobi's argument isn't just simple consciousness. It's really about having a perspective on life that can go better or worse. In his thinking critically about abortion book, he quite literally says that as a staple piece, having a perspective that can go better or worse. I think this implies some sort of being able to get harmed in some consciously meaningful way. I don't know if an ant is conscious. Certainly, you can say it's going off of maybe instincts, a culmination of instincts, or you could say it's somewhat minimally aware, which might be the answer. And if it is minimally aware of what's going on, to some degree that it can meaningfully be harmed, I don't see how it's absurd to say an ant, bird, dog, and so on can be worse off by death or being harmed. I just don't see the criticism here. When someone says, "Oh, so you're saying punching a dog make that dog worse off?" Of course it makes that dog worse off. Are you insane? And if, let's say, it is the case that an ant can be, whether let's just say for the sake of argument, an ant can be uh minimally aware or have consciously meaningfully be harmed, why wouldn't we just say that this ant can be harmed when it is harmed by a specific event? I just don't see how this is absurd. Maybe I need to read into it a little bit more. I just don't find these criticisms of Nathan Nobis's argument interesting. I find them a bit weak. I find them to be ignorant. And I find them to be a bit showing of someone's interest when it comes to good faith debating. This guy was talking so much like against Nathan Nobis in the comment section of TikTok. Was saying, "Are you gonna unblock me from TikTok? Are you gonna unblock me from Twitter? You're such a loser, Nathan Nobis. You're such a loser. Um, I'm gonna keep on debunking all of your stupid arguments." That's what this guy said in Nathan Nobis comment section. I was gonna write a reply. I did write a reply, I was about to ride, you know what I mean, for Nathan Novus, but I forgot where I placed the reply when I was writing it on Obsidian. But I finished the reply. But anyways, so he talked about ants, so I made sure to ask the prompt in this ants about ants. Who can and cannot be harmed? Ants, zygotes, and the capacity for well-being. Given NIWA and the harm well-being requirement, um, when we delineate which entities can be harmed in the relevant sense to be harmed, an individual must be the kind of being that occupies a well-being level. Well, this diverts from Nathan Novus's argument. So sorry. To be harmed, individuals must be a kind of being that occupies a well-being level, meaning that it has the capacity for experience or states that constitute being better off or worse off. Pragmatically, adult humans have this capacity. We feel pleasure, pain, have desires, goals, form friendships, irreducible to pleasure states. Anyways, what am I talking about? So our view can go better or worse. Many non-human animals like primates, dogs, or even simpler creatures like mice and birds have at least some capacity for well-being. For instance, they can experience pain and pleasure to varying degrees. If an entity can feel or experience subjectively, then it has at least some prudential value. An event can harm it by causing suffering or other setbacks to its well-being. Okay. And on the other hand, entities that are entirely non-sentient can lack any capacity for well-being, cannot be harmed. They are simply outside the scope of welfare. A classic example is a rock. Oh my god, they brought up rocks. This is what I was getting like frustrated about. A rock has no experiences, no interest, no life. In the mental sense, crushing a rock or kicking it does not make the rock worse off for itself because there is nothing it is like to be a rock. Okay, I stop. There is. I was gonna bring up another paper. There is no better or worse for from the rock's perspective. Well, Jonathan and Risberg illustrates this point with the example of an ordinary computer. The computer has no capacity for positive and negative well-being and thus occupies no level rather than zero level on the well-being scale. We do not say a rock or laptop has neutral welfare, rather it has no welfare at all. It is not even appropriate to rank it on a scale of being more or less well off. Therefore, you cannot harm a rock or computer in the NIWA sense. Negative influence on welfare. Is that what it like? Negative influence on welfare. Negative influence on well-being account. I'm okay. Come on. I need to lock in. Where am I? Okay, computer has no capacity for positive or negative well-being and thus occupies no level, rather than zero level on the well-being scale. We do not say a rock or a laptop has neutral welfare, rather it has no welfare at all. It's not even appropriate to rank it on a scale of being more or less well off. Therefore, you cannot harm a rock or computer in NIWA sense. Because there is no well-being to diminish, this is a key part of the author's strategy. Harm requires a subject who has well-being that can be negatively influenced. Now consider a human zygote, a fertilized egg, or an early stage embryo. Does it have well-being? According to Johnson and Elekeda, I can't pronounce that. I'm going to look it up because I don't want to be rude. How do I look this up? Google. Ikendo. 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 Give me a second. Okay, back. All right. Elka, I think. I'll say it again. Kendall, my bad. Fertilized egg girl stage embryo does that well-being according to Johnson and Kendall. No, not in the early stage where no nervous system or mental life exists, and a zygote is a biological human life form, but it possesses no mind, no feelings, no awareness. It is in this respect more like a sophisticated organism machine, comparable to the computer example, than like sentient animal. The author argued that an early fetus, certainly in the first trimester, prior to having brain development, has never feels pleasure, pain, or have desires, and nonetheless never occupies a positive or negative well-being level. Indeed, on all standard accounts of well-being, consistent, an early fetus lacks the necessary properties. It has no pleasures, hedonism, no satisfied thwarted desires, no enjoyment of knowledge, relationships, achievements, objective goods. One might wonder if at least it has some mutual well-being level. Well-being zero. Could we say that an early embryo is a neutral welfare level, neither happy nor sad? Johnson and Risberg suggest that the more intuitive answer is that, like the computer or rock, the early fetus does not occupy any well being level at all, precisely because it lacks even the capacity for the states that would give the prudential value. An embryo is alive in a biological sense, but in terms of welfare, it is inert and has no capacity for having positive or negative well being prior to developing a mind. As a result, events affecting a being at that stage cannot harm it because there is nothing in terms of well being to be lowered. We will shortly see how this point is essential to the abortion debate. It is worth noting that this stance does not necessarily deny the fetus is a human organism or that it has potential to attain well-being. It only says that until someone threshold of development is crossed, the acquisition of a mind capable of experiencing the fetus has no welfare properties. Johnson and Enekel, I forgot, explicitly point out that a relatively early fetus will acquire such capacities or well-being if it is not aborted, but if it's aborted, it never has it. In other words, had the fetus lived on and developed, it is aborted earlier. It is aborted earlier. It is in fact never reaches that point, as long as it never actually becomes capable of well-being. It never actually has any well-being level, not even zero. This is analogous to saying a computer, if it has someday upgraded to a conscious AI, then at the future point it can have welfare. But if we dismantle it before then, it never had any welfare at all. And crucially, even knowing that the fetus would have had welfare, well-being later does not mean it has well-being now. Jonathan and Risberg emphasize that a thing can have a root capacity or potential with certain properties without yet having a zero level on the correspondence scale. For example, an acorn has a potential slash root capacity for to become a tall oak tree with branches and leaves, but we don't say an acorn already has a tiny height of 0 feet in the tree terms. It simply isn't measured in that way until it actually starts developing those features. Similarly, an early fetus may have the radical capacity in themastic terms for rationality, friends, etc., by virtue of belonging to a group species. But Jonathan and Elkin, I need to pronounce this right because I don't want to feel bad about mispronouncing their name. Ekendall. For example, da da da. Belonging to, but Johnson and Jonathan and Ekendall argue that this broad potential is not sufficient for having any well-being level yet. The fetus would need to acquire a more developed immediate capacity like functioning nervous system enabling pleasure slash pain before we can meaningfully say it has even a neutral point on the well-being scale. Until then, it is not even in the competition of being better or worse off. Given this reasoning, entities like the zygote and early fetuses cannot be harmed because they feel the well-being requirement. They do not yet occupy a lifetime well-being level at all. By contrast, entities like ants, assuming they feel pain, can be harmed since they do not since they do have minimal well-being. And of course, normal adults clearly can be harmed as they have rich well-being. What about beings on the boundary, like anencephalic newborns born without functioning brains or permanently unconscious patients? These cases are analogous to the fetus in that there is an absence of mental life. An anencephalic baby, for instance, lacks the capacity for anything but perhaps basic reflexes. It is truly devoid of consciousness. It might be in the unfortunate position of never having any well-being despite being biologically alive. In that tragic scenario, Jonason's framework would imply that such an infant can experience harm to itself. Nothing can make it life go worse or better as experienced by it. The person never emerges. There is admittedly a hard case, but it underscores the principle where there is no sentience, no welfare subject, there is no harm in NIWA sense. Before moving on, let's clarify people in a permanent vegetative state, PVS, or those who are brain dead. Such individuals were once persons with minds, but now, due to an injury or illness, lost all capacity for consciousness. A brain dead individual is usually considered medically or legally dead, since there is no possibility of recovery. The brain no longer supports functions for awareness. In that case, effectively, the person or individual no longer has a welfare subject present. They have brainstem functioning cycles of wakefulness but no signs of awareness. Some PVS cases are permanent. Others might eventually regain consciousness, though rarely. Can a PVS patient still have well-being level? Jonathan and Ekendall address philosophers might suggest that such a life is of negative well-being, perhaps due to the loss of dignity or relationships. But the authors note that whatever we say about well-being of a person in lifelong comas, Those considerations, like indignity, clearly do not apply to any early fetuses. The fetus isn't experiencing anything, but also it isn't missing out on relationships or suffering indignity in its own perspective, since it has no perspective. Jensen's view would likely be that PVS patients at present has no conscious experience, thus no current positive or negative well-being. They feel nothing. However, critically, that patient does have a lifetime well-being level in virtue of their past. Recall that a lifetime well-being just requires having had some temporal well-being at some time. A person who is now in a vegetative state almost certainly had years of experiences before the injury, times when they were happy, sad, in pain, in pleasure, etc. So their life as a whole includes those periods of well-being. That means they meet well-being requirement. They occupy a lifetime well-being level. Say their life up to now has a certain amount of prudential value. Because of that, certain events can still harm them in a lifetime sense. For example, suppose a PVS patient could possibly recover in a year and go to live for decades. If someone intentionally pulls the plug prematurely, that action would prevent all the goods of those decades from occurring in the patient's life. Even though the patient felt nothing at that moment, the death would lower the lifetime total well-being by truncating any future recovery and experiences, thus according to NIAA, causing the death of lifetime total well-being. Okay. Thus, according to NIAA, causing the death of a PVS patient can still harm them, not by causing present pain, but by adversely affecting their overall shape of their life, specifically making it shorter and cutting off any future well-being they might have had. As Johnson and I can't pronounce this. Kendall. So, but Kendall with an E, okay, at the front. Johnson and E. Kendall explain what matters is whether the individual ever meets that condition of having capacities for well-being. A comatose person typically has those capacities in the past. She has a lifetime well-being level and so meets the relevant condition and well-being requirement. In fact, they explicitly know that in their proposal. Note that their proposal does not imply that comatose patients cannot be harmed by death, because those patients did occupy well-being levels earlier. They still count as individuals who can be harmed by being killed. The harm here would be the loss of whatever remaining life that could have been good for them. In contrast, if someone truly never had any conscious life at all, like a hypothetical person born in a permanent insatiated, perhaps killing them would not harm them, though such cases are exceedingly rare or theoretical. In summary, NIAA condition for harm draws a crucial line based on the capacity for well-being. Beings like rocks, plants, or early embryos lack any sentience, according cannot be harmed in the sense of having their well-being lowered because they have no well-being. By contrast, any being that at least at some time does feel or experience can have a welfare level and thus can be harmed. This reasoning is not merely semantic, it underpins arguments about who or what has moral status. Is not merely semantic, it underpins who or what has moral status. Generally, moral status is closely linked to the capacity to be harmed or benefited. We tend to think something matters morally if there's someone there who can be better or worse off. The fact that rocks have no well-being is one reason we don't attribute moral right to rocks in ethical debates. Some argue that early fetuses before consciousness likewise lack moral standing because they cannot themselves be harmed or benefited, though they might be deprived moral concerns. Johnson and a Kendall argument certainly support the idea that having a welfare is prerequisite for having interests that morally count. However, they frame their paper as focusing on harm rather than directly moral status. But the implication is clear that if the abortion is harmless to the fetus due to the lack of fetal well-being, then one major reason to be considered immoral dissipates. Abortion and the well-being requirement. Why early abortion does not harm the fetus. With this theoretical background, we can see Jennison, with the co-author Carl E. Kendall, applies the NIW framework to concrete ethical issue in does abortion harm the fetus? A common claim in the abortion debate is what they dub harm claim, the assertion that abortion harms the fetus and that this harm makes abortion morally wrong. Many anti-abortion arguments, such as Don Marquis' famous Future Like Ours, rest on the idea by arguing that the fetus you're depriving is a valuable future like ours. Future life, thus inflicting on it the greatest harm, the harm of death. Marquis, for instance, claims have been, and he explicitly extends this reasoning to fetuses by saying abortion robs them of a future full of value. On the face of it, if one accepts the counterfactual comparative notion of harm, comparing life with abortion versus life without abortion, it seems abortion would leave the fetus worse off, since counterfactual, where it isn't aborted, would enjoy a full life. Jennison and E. Kendall, however, introduces a very straightforward rejoinder. The aborted fetus cannot be harmed because at the time of the abortion and ever after, it does not occupy any well-being level at all. This is the direct application of well-being requirement we outlined. They argue that early abortions, they limit their discussion to abortions before roughly 20 weeks of gestation, are performed at a stage where the fetus has no capacity for consciousness. Therefore, at no point does the fetus ever attain even a neutral state of welfare. It is simply never enters the realm of well-being. Since harm requires reducing someone's well-being, the fetus at that stage has no well-being level to reduce. The abortion does not harm it. In their own words, the aborted fetus cannot be harmed for the simple reason that it does not occupy any well-being level. This one line captures the crux of their thesis. It is important to note how minimalist and commonsensical this strategy is. They are not invoking any controversial theories of personal identity, such as the idea that we were never fetuses, a view some philosophers use to claim fetuses isn't numerically identical to the later person, nor are they relying on a non-standard account of harm that deviates from the ordinary usage. On the contrary, they use a standard necessary condition for harm that virtually everyone can agree on. The victim must have welfare interest. And a factual observation from developmental science that early fetuses have surprisingly overlooked directly approaches have surprisingly overlooked abortion ethics, which is why the authors present it as a previously neglected strategy worthy of attention. It aligns with NIAA negative influence and well-being account because NIAA says harm equal negative influence on well-being. So obviously there is no well-being, there is no harm, and we say all major harm accounts implicitly share that implication. So Jennison and E. Kendall are basically shining a spotlight on an implication of a common harm thesis or theory that has not been foreground in the abortion context, the well-being requirement. They buttress this argument with the analogy we discussed. Just as bringing up a computer into existence doesn't make it poor or unhappy, it has no wealth or welfare at all. Bringing a fetus to term is necessary for it to ever have a well-being, and if that never happens, the fetus at that time of abortion is not a being with welfare. The fetus has no capacity for positive or negative well-being, lacking mental properties. Thus, even though had it lived, it would have developed such capacities. One cannot say the fetus at 10 weeks already has welfare that abortion subtracts from. At that stage, prevents the fetus from ever acquiring welfare level, but it does not itself lower an existing welfare level, which is what harm would require. To put it differently, compare a fetus aborted at 10th week to a fetus that is not aborted and eventually is born and grow into, let's say, a 50-year-old person. For this person who lives, we can imagine various events that might harm them. Jennison and E. Kendall give examples of something that happens to a fetus in utero if it is born could harm the person later. Example: exposure to the exposure that causes the person to die prematurely at the age of 50. That would be a genuine harm. The fetus would, who will become that person, had a lifetime full of well-being ahead, and the event robbed them of some of it, leading them to die earlier than they would have, thereby reducing their lifetime well-being. But in the case of the fetus that is aborted, um, at 10 weeks, that individual never experiences anything at all, ever. There is no point in its existence at which it enjoys goods or suffers evils. It has no baseline welfare, which abortion pushed downwards. Abortion ensures it never comes to have welfare history, and thus, while tragic in some sense, it has not a harm to the fetus by any standard harm criterion. The author concludes plainly, given the welfare requirement, then nothing, including the abortion, harms the early fetus. It is worth clarifying that Johnson and E. Kendall confine their claim abortions that are not unusually late, roughly meaning that before 20 weeks of gestation. The reason is around 20 weeks, scientific evidence suggests that fetuses begin to acquire a capacity for conscious pain perception, and at least, indeed, they cite the current scientific consensus. At around week 20, a fetus develops the neurological capacity for mental states. If that is correct, a fetus older than 20 weeks may occupy a well-being level that is possible. Wait, uh, maybe I can, just to see how much I know, addressing objections. Oh, I almost finished this. All right, I want to test if I can transfer these ideas over. So I'll jump in the game and see if anything works. Oh, brother. I'll turn on the screen.
What was the question?
What is
I
going
have
on
brain
here?
dysmorphia. I don't easily remember things. I'm sorry. Why is it bad to put an end to someone that might not? What? That was not your question. That might not have a.
Ooh,
You can have a good
they're bringing
life.
up quality of life. This is what
Why
I'm going to go
is
at.
it bad to put an end to stuff? Okay, first off, how would you know that? That's inferring. We don't know. We don't know. Just like how random people become billionaires, just like how random people become these influential people, just like how Abraham Lincoln, he could have been
Jesus
aborted,
Christ.
right?
Please.
But he wasn't, and he became an influential person. So how do we know that that person's going to become have a good life or a bad life? You can't really infer that. You should give everyone a chance to live, just like how your mother gave you a chance to live. Why can't we give those 1.3 billion babies that die every century or decade a chance to live, but we gave you one? We can give them a chance to live a good life, but we gave you one?
Bro, what is?
Like, it doesn't make sense. That's like,
Is this just a comment section debate? Like, you're kind of ranting right now. Let people up. Maybe I have to. I don't want to LARP as pro-life. That's a bit cringe. Bro went AFK, dude. I got I got suspended. I'll be back. Server is cooked. Here's one. I didn't read the title fully. What is
Like
this?
be
I'm looking
excluded from
morally
causal relationships,
censurable.
like
What
within
does
the universe, right?
censurable mean?
Which would
Yeah.
be so they would be. I'm honest. I don't see like the issue here. Right? Like I don't see why we. I guess I just ask you for justification on why we wouldn't be able to derive these things, at least in a reliable sense, right? Like what would be the justification?
He's
for that
using the word
proposition?
derived. He has
Well,
to know
if
something
if
about it.
every sort of state of mind is the result of natural states, pre-existing natural states, then why should it be that actually like follows any logical pattern? Of course, like
Logical
the natural states themselves are acting in a logical manner because, as you said, there can be no other way to act. But why should it be that these material states actually bring about coherent logical thinking,
I
if
see.
that makes sense, or reason?
Oh, that makes sense. It
What?
does make sense.
Okay. So do you know what I mean when like within my argument when I state the laws of nature?
I assume you mean some like the cosmological principle, things like that.
Or
Basically,
just
it's
constants
that
within
Cosmological
the
principle.
universe, right?
if we roll up, basically, if we roll a
Pardon?
rock
What'd you say?
down a hill, it's
Just
gonna
like
follow
just constants
the laws
within the
of
universe.
physics,
So
which
logic
follows
would
the
be
laws
Yeah.
of
grounded as
logic.
one of these, right?
Something
There would be
like that.
laws of laws of thermodynamics, right? There,
Yes, yes, yes.
You know what I you know what I mean, right? Like I know you know what I mean.
I
So
can.
There's overarching laws of nature.
yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay.
So, but when we talk about these things, like laws themselves are concepts, right? These are already things that are grounded
Laws are
logically, right?
concepts?
Or that we derive logically, right? So that the laws alone aren't going to be material things, right? What things that are going to be materialistic are what's being described through logic within these laws. So logic is just always going to be precept in like anything. So it's always gonna be part of the laws of nature, anyways, because that's just this descriptive rule of our universe, right? That's just or just existence alone. It's just going to be that case inevitably. So like yeah, there would be no issue in grounding that the laws of nature in the past are going to predetermine what happens, right? Are going to predetermine the thinking and what is going to be processed through a human mind later on down the timeline.
I feel like I'll still continue with this line of argumentation, but I feel like the same could also be said. Like why couldn't or here, I suppose I'll ask this actually. Do you think logical reasoning is possible without free will?
So without free will, do I think that logical reasoning
In the
is possible?
compatibilist or libertarian sense? Either one, it doesn't really matter.
or determinism as well?
Well, do you think free will exists under determinism, I suppose?
Oh well, no.
Okay.
That's kind of what we're arguing for. is
Okay.
that free will is like
You
a
can be a
concept that's just
Right, right,
compatibilist
right.
Yeah,
and a
that's-
non-compatibilist.
So
in
how
regards to determinism.
would not
It's
how
not
would
gonna
logic,
be the
but do you
case
think
that
logic would
free
be
will is
possible
gonna,
without free will?
It can be.
Yeah,
it can be the
absolutely.
case that free will can exist
Okay.
in
I
a
don't
see any
deterministic
contradiction.
universe.
I mean, unless you
If you're a
could bring up a contention to
compatibilist,
that.
but
I'm not
most
too sure.
people, I would
I mean, I haven't
object
thought
against the
about it, but I mean,
compatibilist
if you have anything to say, I'd
argument
love to.
that says free will is
Yeah, it's going to be
compatible with
extremely
determinism. I'd say
jumbled, but I'll
it's better
try.
to be it's more rational that
I
a
think
non-compatibilist argument
it's
for
like
that determinism is not compatible with free
Uh,
will is going to be more logical.
if free will isn't there, and you're only acting according to material states. Like, I don't see any actual connection between material states and between this like apprehension of this like immaterial realm, if that makes sense. Because it would seem that the apprehension seems to be more of like, it seems to be more immaterial in nature, and that if natural states were to determine it, then it's not actually based off of some sort of logical reasoning, but because reason is different from just like logical occurrences.
Who's talking? Wait, do you hear that? I'm sorry. Do you hear that? Like,
Is that in my background? Did you hear that?
is it in your background? Is there like someone? Oh, I
That
thought
might
it
have
was
been in my
someone else.
background.
I thought it was someone else.
No.
Like, my bad.
My bad. Nah, but like I feel like apprehension is different enough from some like material states. Like how would material states bring about an actual rational apprehension of some belief or something? Because it's like, I don't know. I'm not explaining this very
This would
well.
like be presupposing that what I said prior to this, right, would be incorrect, right? That I feel like this would be presupposing because what I said prior to this would be a direct response to this.
Wait, is it mic 1, 2, 3? Is mic
I honestly do not remember what you said before this.
It's okay. It's okay, Rex.
Wait.
I have to go like right now, anyways, because
1, 2,
I
3.
kind of want to.
Okay.
The microphone's not
Yeah, I'm
working.
so
But,
sorry, man. Have a good one.
Is the microphone
You're good, bro. I'll see you.
working? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1. Oh my god,
Wait, are you leaving? Oh no, there he goes. Okay. Hey, how's it going, Falcon?
1, 2, 3. Wait.
Oh, no, not Falcon.
Sorry if you heard that. Your mic is not working, Falcon. You can try and rejoin or just set it on your Roblox.
Oh, I'm tired. I woke up at 5 a.m.
You woke up at 5 a.m. To do what?
5 a.m.
It's a Sunday.
Let's go, guys. Guys, all my favorite influencers are in the 5 a.m. club.
Your mic still is not working, Falcon, if you're trying to talk.
But Rex, if you think about it, if you wake up at 5 and then go to bed at 10, that's 8 hours of sleep, right? Oh wait, no, that's 7. Oh my god, I'm stupid. No way, I just said that.
Wait, actually, you're back? You are banned?
Hey guys, what does censurable mean?
Censurable means like morally condemnable. Like it's wrong.
Like impermissible?
Do you have any alt accounts? Impermissible, yeah. I mean, not necessarily impermissible. It's just like wrong, and like generally things which are wrong would be impermissible. So yeah, if you want to look at it that way, it's fine. But it's more just like
Okay.
it's a condemnable action, like it's wrong.
Okay.